It's not a problem, here it is. And everybody said, that's ridiculous. Including me. I was one of them. I didn't believe it. Because I had seen so many failures to create money for the internet, and I didn't believe it was even possible. So when this was released, I was not a believer. I remember getting emails in 2010 saying, you should pay attention to this because you love the idea of markets controlling money. Finally, it has happened, and I just doubted it because I couldn't understand the white paper. Like, for me, reading the white paper in 2009 was a little bit like me trying to read Korean today. I couldn't understand it. So it was tough. It was tough. But I eventually came around, became a champion of this great new asset and its use. But what I'd like to do today is talk to you a little bit about something I think is extremely important. I don't think that people really understand just how important this asset is in the history of ideas. And whether you understand this or not is extremely important for the architecture of cryptocurrency going forward in time. So I would like to take you back a little bit to the late 19th century. There was a gigantic debate that took place in the mostly German-speaking world between two really strong opponents of each other. There were two really strong positions, and I would like to present them to you today to understand who won the intellectual debate versus who won the political debate, and why the advent of blockchain technology has completely reversed this narrative. So I've noticed a lot of talks today are really focused on the here and now. What projects we're completing, what companies are coming along, what is the rate of adoption, and so on and so on. But I think it's important to back up and understand just how much of history has been dramatically changed by the advent of this technology, so that we can see that because of cryptocurrency, I mean, I speak of Bitcoin and every other one of the assets in the space, that history has completely changed, and that the future is going to be very different from what it is today. I'll just give you one conclusion I'll give you. I don't believe that there's any future whatsoever to national monetary systems. Like, they are not going to be viable anymore. They will become ineffectual and basically irrelevant. Not tomorrow, not in the next 5 years, but sometime over the next 25 years, I would estimate. We'll no longer care about national monetary systems. We'll only be thinking about cryptocurrency as a global thing. And can I just say, just for the record, that I am inspired beyond description by the very existence of this conference. I mean, I've never been to Korea in my life. I come here, I find people who love desperately the same thing I love. And this has been true whether it's been in Brazil, or New Zealand, or Australia, or Budapest, or Prague. Anywhere I've traveled, I find people that deeply love this currency and see it as a future for humanity, for harmony and prosperity for the whole of humankind. So thank you for being here. It inspires me very much. So yeah, go ahead. That's right. We're all brothers and sisters together in this great struggle, which I think is ultimately a struggle for freedom. Actually, it's a struggle for freedom. The struggle against national currency is a struggle for freedom. That's my view. So let me take you back to the late 19th century. Now, in the Western world, we had lived through about 100 years of growing progress towards liberalization, or liberalism generally. Ever freer trade, ever freer markets, ever better, sounder money. But in the late 19th century, a certain thing began to happen in Europe where there was a move on to abandon principles of market economics and liberalism and embrace central banking and government control of money. And this happened in about the 1880s and 1890s in the German-speaking world, with the rise of Bismarck and a resistance to that rise. So there are two great theories of money that went along with this struggle. I think it's a struggle for freedom, but it was an intellectual struggle. And there were two schools of thought. One represented by a guy who came to write a book that came out in 1905, and his name was George Frederick Knapp, K-N-A-P-P, right? And you should read this book. You can download it now and see what his views are. His view, the name of the book is The State Theory of Money. And it was extremely influential. And governments all around the world really liked this book. And the reason is the following. The question he asked is, what kind of money should a society have? And what is the basis for its value? And his answer was the following. He said, the right kind of money for society should be something endorsed by and approved by the political system, the state authority. Only the state can give money the kind of value that it needs, because the value of money comes from prestige, institutional authority, the taxing power, the regulatory power, the awesomeness of the state itself. Now, in many ways, this view was a fulfillment of the views of George Frederick Hegel, who had written almost a century earlier that the end state of humankind should always be towards compliance with government officials. Yeah? The state itself would complete the narrative of history, and money should be a part of that. It's a state theory of money. The idea, it's a little bit strange, but this was at the end point where we used to have a gold standard. Now, a gold standard is a very interesting monetary system because though the currencies would have different names for themselves, they were all ultimately rooted in gold itself. So we had a kind of international money. But this was coming to an end because many governments, including in Germany and in the UK, and eventually in the United States, would adopt central banking. They would nationalize their monetary systems under government authority. So they needed some kind of intellectual rationale, and George Frederick Knapp provided that by saying this is the right kind of money. Money should be national, it should be controlled by politics. This is the only way forward. Now, on the other side of this great struggle, this great debate over what gives money value, was an economist by the name of Carl Menger, M-E-N-G-E-R. And he wrote in the 1880s and 1890s. And he wrote a book called The Principles of Economics that had an entire section in there about money. And what he proved, obviously I'm a partisan here, I'm a Mengerian, not a Knappian. I like Menger, not Knapp. What he proved is that money ultimately, historically, grows out of a process of market exchange. It's organic to the market, that it doesn't necessarily involve the state. That's an extension of our trading relationships with each other. In fact, he went even further and said that every existing money had its roots ultimately in voluntary exchange by individuals. So money originates out of the desire on the part of people to live a better life. We invent money for ourselves because we're dissatisfied with the limits of barter exchange. So under a barter kind of system of economics, I can only exchange what I possess for what you possess, only for consumption purposes. So if I have an egg, and you have a bushel of leaves, we can trade and consume the thing that we want, and that's good. The problem is if I have an egg and you have a horse, now we've got a problem because the horse isn't divisible. If you cut off its leg, it's not that useful. So we need something else to trade. So we invent money as a very interesting, very special good in society. It's the thing you desire to have, not because you want to consume it, but because you want to trade it later for something else. So it's like a speculation. And this money becomes a means of exchange. It becomes the thing that facilitates trade. It allows for you to have, to plan better for the future. That's what money does, and market-based money does. It allows you to plan for the future. It also, very critically and very importantly, allows for you to have accounting. So if for example, money, the egg itself becomes money, you might trade your horse for a certain number of eggs, and then you can start to do business, because now you have ability to calculate profit and loss. This is the Menger theory of money's origins. And ultimately, he's correct. You see in his story, the state and state authority and external imposition and intellectuals don't matter. It doesn't matter what the intellectuals say or what the state says. Money is an emergent property. And what you see throughout history is, in fact, this is really true. So money has taken many different forms throughout history. Some of our earliest records from the ancient world show that salt was itself money, the most valuable good, the thing that you would strive to acquire, not because you necessarily wanted salt, but because you anticipated you could trade it for something even more valuable later. And shells were very valuable in Native American culture in America. The wampum shells were very valuable. Even today, in the island of Yak, for thousands of years, they've been using this gigantic stones to calculate as money, ownership rights to a portion of a stone. And money takes many, many forms this way throughout history. Even now, money is being invented every single day. I'll tell you a couple of examples of this. So I've had friends who have had to go to prison for a brief periods of time, and prison doesn't have money like we think of it, but every prison has its own invented form of money. So I have one friend who was in prison, and the money that was very commonly used was what we call in the United States ramen noodles, which are these little dried noodle packages. I don't know if you've seen them. So you would trade, you would acquire those. So the barber at the prison would accept ramen noodles instead of money. In fact, the ramen noodles were money. And another case, a friend of mine said that in the prison he was in, I have a lot of friends in or out of prison, actually, probably. Not me yet. We'll see. I hope. Just jail a couple of times, but that's not that big a deal. Nobody cares about it. But in his prison, they used cans of fish and cans of mackerel, I believe it was, and that they would serve as money. And so you can see that this was emergent because the fish was the most valuable thing. You knew you could get it, not to consume it, but because you could anticipate trading it for something else later. And my friend tells a funny story. Actually, this is Charlie Schrin, actually. You probably know him. He's a kind of a blockchain crypto guy. He's very early on in the space. He tells a funny story about one guy became like a hodler, like holding a ton of these cans of fish, and stacked them all under his bed. And then he got taken off to solitary confinement, and the warden raided his prison cell, and they discovered something like 60 cans of fish or something like this. And the warden came out and put them all on the dining room table and said, "Oh, this guy had all these fish, So here's all these cans. Well, guess what happened to prices immediately in the prison economy? They all went up, right? So it's like an inflationary situation, you know. And you can find this all the time. Anytime that people are denied access to the main money, that they will figure out how to make the money. This is extremely important because it proves something very important for the crypto world. Namely, that the value of the asset ultimately traces to its use value as a medium of exchange. Without that use value as a medium of exchange, the asset actually loses its value over time. And so you cannot separate the value of an asset from its use. So let me take you back again to Knapp and Menger in this great dispute between the two. Ultimately, I think Menger won the intellectual case, but he lost the political debate, right? Instead, we got nationalized money in all countries. We got nationalized money in the US, and in Germany, and in England, and all over the world. We suddenly had central banks, and gradually the money got worse and worse and worse. It was no longer subject to a market test. Its value came from the fact that it previously had been a market commodity, but it was nationalized now by the government. And so what that did is it took away innovation from the space. So for 100 years, for 100 years, instead of having an innovative, creative, brilliant, useful currency, we've only had the thing the government has forced us to use. And it's not been very good for us. In the United States, in 1933, it was actually a remarkable thing. We had a president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who came to power and immediately said the way to cure the Great Depression, which was affecting the economy, was to shut all the banks down, force everybody to give up their gold holdings, personal gold holdings, and once he did that, then he reduced the value of money from 1/20th an ounce to 1/35th an ounce. And what that did was essentially stole 40% of the purchasing power of the American people. It was like, and defaulted on all gold contracts. That's what happened. And this has been going on ever since. The gold window was shut in 1974. Now we have purely paper currencies, and it's all been terrible. And there's a tremendous counterparty risk associated with trading, and high costs, and 5-day settlements. And even now, I mean, it's actually remarkable to think how bad and terrible these national monetary systems are. Government controls everything. They create all kind of booms and busts in these national economic environments. And have you tried to transfer money internationally recently? It's actually egregiously bad. It's like old-fashioned. It's like we're living 50 years ago. Settlement times are slow. It requires a trust-based system. If a person doesn't have a bank account, there's essentially no way to do it. It's very difficult, extremely cumbersome, and very old-fashioned. So Bitcoin comes into the space. He says, you know what? Let's forget about all these silly institutions, these trust-based systems, and have a decentralized method where we can peer-to-peer exchange value. So it's actually money for the internet. The creation of something in many ways that was an improvement on the old gold standard, which was a global currency system, is an improvement because gold takes up space and it weighs a lot. And Bitcoin doesn't take up any space and it doesn't weigh anything at all. So you can easily transfer it peer-to-peer. But otherwise it has all the features of money. It's got divisibility, it's got value per unit, and it's got fungibility, equal quality for every single unit, and so on and so on. In many ways, it's the perfect money. And by Bitcoin, I don't mean just BTC. I mean BCH and Dash and Monero and every other one of these brilliant currencies. And the reason it obtained value, my friends, and this is what I want you to hear and understand. The reason the price went from 0, which is what it was, between January of 2009 and October of 2009. The price was 0, and then it began to change. I think it was on October 5th of 2009, the first posted price of Bitcoin was 1/16 of a penny. The reason it obtained that, and then I guess about a year later is worth $1. I got into the space when it was worth about $14, and I watched it go up and down ever since. The reason it obtained value was not because anybody gave it value. There wasn't any outside authority. Let us remember, please, and you've heard a lot of experts here, right? And you turn on your television, you see brilliant politicians talking all about the international monetary system. None of these people invented Bitcoin. They weren't involved. The intellectuals did not do it. The inventor of Bitcoin was a person or a group of people whose names we don't even know. Goes by the name Satoshi Nakamoto. Released on an open forum, on an email list that anybody could join. It was a bottom-up enterprise. That's the right way. That's consistent with the whole history of money. Not imposed from above, but coming from the ground up. A revolution against states and against intellectuals who think they know better. So Bitcoin began its march up in price because it was useful. Now, those of you who have followed my remarks so far might begin to suspect what it is I'm driving at here. I think it's extremely important that we understand this. You cannot drive a wedge between what some people call the store of value on one hand and the medium of exchange on the other. The use case must always inform the value case. You cannot separate those two things. And unfortunately, and it's very sad for me, as somebody who's been using Bitcoin since 2013 on regular transactions, that there are many people today who gravely are making this grave mistake in thinking that Bitcoin or any of these other crypto assets can become a store of value, even though they're not a superior currency in use. And it's very tragic to me. I told myself I wasn't going to do that, but I have to say something about this right now. In 2017, it became very obvious that a debate that had consumed the crypto community for up to 3 and even 4 years, namely the scaling problem, came to its fruition. And suddenly in 2017, you could hardly even use Bitcoin at all. It became extremely expensive and very slow. And it seriously hurt adoption at a time when we were seeking ever more users and ever more adoption. Suddenly, people would adopt it and try to use it and find it almost useless. In fact, it wasn't even nearly as useful as your typical Visa or MasterCard or Venmo or PayPal or anything else. Now, to be sure, there's a big difference between using cryptocurrency and using a trust-based system. For one thing, crypto transactions are finally settled. Like it's a real exchange of value without trust, and that's very beautiful. But from a user point of view, if you cannot use the currency in a way that's viable, that's fast and cheap, its function as a store of value will eventually disappear. And I think, and I can't prove this, but that this was a major reason why we saw a gigantic crash in price at the end of 2017 all through 2018, because it was not very useful. So I consider this a great failing on the part of the Bitcoin core development team, and I fully understand why we've seen this explosion of other assets out there. We have real, genuine currency competition because Bitcoin Core failed to perform its function. Well, here we are 18 months later, And you can tell that the sentiment in the market has changed already in the last 48 hours. Can't prove it, can't say for sure, but it looks as if the bears are being chased away and the bulls are getting interested in crypto again, as was inevitable anyway. And you all in this room knew this, right? We knew this day was coming. We didn't know where it was coming. We didn't know when it was, but maybe it's here. Let's say it's here. I'm speaking to you today with great disappointment that even now, Bitcoin Core has not improved. Segwit didn't fix it. The Lightning Network, which I massively support, is not ready. And so even now, here we are, 2 years after we saw this calamity occur, and we're no better off. And it's deeply tragic to me. I look forward to the Lightning Network. I think it's going to be glorious. I can't wait. But meanwhile, you have the defenders of this very conservative small blocks telling me that Bitcoin is not supposed to be a medium of exchange, it's supposed to be a store of value. And what I'm telling you here is that this is an implausible claim. It cannot be true. It's inconsistent with everything we know about money, and I think, unfortunately, the people who claim this are, in many ways, reviving the failed view of George Frederick Knapp, that believes that authority alone can be a source of value for cryptocurrencies, for any money at all. Authority alone cannot do it. It doesn't matter that Bitcoin was the first mover in the space. It doesn't matter that all the big shots say that BTC is the way to go, or that we have the best programmers behind BTC, or the most mining, or the largest network. None of that matters. If you can't get a use case in order, BTC will ultimately lose value and give up its #1 spot for some other currency. Now, to me, that is not tragic. That is not sad, because we're entering into a new world. People say, are you a Bitcoin maximalist? No, I'm not. I'm a competition maximalist. Right now, we've entered into a world of tremendous innovation in currency and contracting and in law and everything else associated with blockchain economics. Nothing is going to stop that. These ideas are not going away. They're not going anywhere. The old systems of centralized control and top-down imposition and government mastery of the world and central banks manipulating their economies according to their monopolistic standards and trying to manage macro, and they know it. Christine Lagarde from the IMF, at a speech at the Bank of England about 18 months ago, said this. She said, without full control of money, nation states cannot maintain their power. I think she's right about that. She didn't have an answer. All she said was, this is what's true. We're going to enter into a world of constant competition. Will there be one winner? I don't believe so. I think we have to get used to the new world we live, where governments do not control currency, where there's not one winner to the competition is going to go on and on and on, and money's going to get better and better and better, and ever more friendly and usable, and lead to the world that I, associated both with the American Institute for Economic Research and the Atlanta Bitcoin Embassy, look forward to. And it's a world of competition and choice and humane gathering of all peoples in the world in a common project to make the world more prosperous, more peaceful, and more beautiful. Thank you so much for listening to me. Bye-bye.